Dear Ellen Morgan sat in the dimly lit control room of the orbital observatory. Her fingers danced over the console as a string of data appeared on the screen. The patterns were unfamiliar at first glance, but something about them felt different. There was an odd familiarity to the signal, a pull that tugged at her instincts. She leaned closer to the screen, studying the waveform. It wasn't natural. She was sure of that. The signal was too organized, too structured for the random noise space usually produced. She felt a thrill of excitement ripple through her. It had to be something important. The Earth had been listening to the stars for decades, but they had never encountered anything like this. Before, the signal was sharp, like a beacon cutting through the cosmic static. It had appeared out of nowhere a few hours ago, coming from a star system far beyond the reach of current human exploration. Ellen had initially thought it was a glitch in the system, but the more she analyzed it, the more she realized it was deliberate. It was a message, a cry for help, or something more. The question was who was sending it, and why wasn't it meant for humans? Her mind raced as she typed rapidly, pulling up every possible resource on the signal to confirm her suspicions. She checked the algorithm again, but there was no mistake. The code didn't match anything in their database. No alien language, no known communication pattern. This wasn't just a random cosmic event. The signal was intelligent. Someone or something had deliberately sent it out, and she knew that it was too important to ignore. Ellen's heart pounded in her chest as she leaned back in her chair, tapping her fingers against the desk. She could feel the weight of the moment settling in. No one would believe her at first. It would sound like a wild theory, a mistake, an overreaction. She could already hear the skeptical voices of her colleagues dismissing it. They'd call it another false alarm, just like the many before it. But deep down she knew this was different. There was a desperation in the frequency of the signal, a kind of urgency. It felt almost human. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was late, and the others had gone home for the night. They had all seen their fair share of anomalies, and had grown numb to the endless scanning of empty space. But Ellen couldn't shake the feeling that this was a turning point. This could be the first contact. Humanity had been waiting for the moment when the silence of the universe was finally broken. And if she was right, if this was truly a message from an alien civilization, it could mean everything. With a deep breath, she turned back to the console and opened a secure communication link to her superior. A message popped up on the screen asking if she was certain about her findings. She hesitated for only a moment before replying yes. She was sure. She had to be sure. The signal wasn't meant for humans, but they would respond anyway. And when they did, she had no idea what would happen next. But there was no turning back now. The future of humanity could be on the line. The response from Ellen's superior came faster than expected. Almost immediately, a video feed popped up on her screen. Director Davis's stern face filled the frame, his expression unreadable. Ellen took a deep breath before speaking, her voice steady, but laced with a tension she couldn't hide. Director, this signal is unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's not a natural occurrence, I'm certain of it. Ellen's eyes never left the screen as she spoke, watching Davis's face for any sign of disbelief or concern. Instead, he remained silent for a long moment before nodding slowly. You've been through the data several times, Dr. Morgan, he said, his tone measured. We've all seen anomalies before. This one doesn't appear to fit any of the patterns we know, not even the ones we're theorizing for alien communication. If you're right, though, this could be a breakthrough. But we need more confirmation. Ellen felt a surge of frustration rising in her chest. She wasn't asking for confirmation, she was offering it. She had already done the calculations and the analysis herself, but she knew better than to push too hard. She had to make him see the gravity of it. I understand, but Director, this message isn't like the others. This one feels urgent. I've run the simulations. I've even tried to mimic the signal with our own equipment, and nothing matches it. The complexity, the structure. It's too precise to be random. She paused, trying to find the right words. It's deliberate, it's intelligent, and it's too loud to be ignored. Davis's face softened slightly as he looked at her, a flicker of concern finally breaking through his professional demeanor. What exactly are you proposing we do with this information? He asked. If this is a signal from an alien species, and it was never intended for humans, why would we engage with it? Ellen hesitated only for a second before answering. because they might need help. She could feel the weight of the words settling in her stomach, but there was no turning back now. The signal isn't meant for us, I'm sure of that, but they've sent it anyway. And if we ignore it, we risk missing something crucial. Davis sighed and rubbed his temples for a moment as if the gravity of the situation had finally hit him. Then he turned to his console and began typing. The tension in the room grew palpable as seconds stretched into minutes. Ellen's eyes flicked from the screen to the small readout that showed the incoming data from the signal, as though it could offer some new insight. Finally, the director spoke again, his voice softer this time. "All right, Dr. Morgan, we'll take it to the higher-ups, but you know as well as I do that the chances of getting approval for any kind of engagement are slim. We're talking about responding to a message from the stars. We don't even know if it's safe." He paused, looking directly at her. "This is a long shot." Ellen nodded. She knew the risks better than anyone, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was the start of something monumental. "I'm willing to take that risk," she said quietly. The decision was made within hours. A secure team was assembled, and the response was drafted. A simple message at first, a confirmation of receipt, followed by an offer of help if needed. The world held its breath as the transmission was sent, but no one expected what happened next. Just hours later, the signal flared again, stronger this time, almost as if it had been waiting for their reply. It was louder, it was clearer, and it was unmistakably directed at them. Humanity had answered, and now something was coming, and they were about to find out exactly what it was. The skies above Earth darkened in ways that no one could have predicted. Not a single cloud in sight, but something else was shifting. A shadow too large to be cast by anything earthly flickered across the horizon. A deep hum reverberated through the atmosphere, a sound not from any plane or spacecraft, but from somewhere deep in the fabric of space itself. People looked up, and for the first time in history, humanity as a whole stood still, as though the very planet had taken a collective breath. Something was coming, something vast and incomprehensible. Ellen was the first to notice the disturbance on her console at the observatory. The tracking systems had gone wild, but the data was inconsistent, as if the object that appeared on their screens wasn't moving according to any known laws of physics. The velocity was impossible. The scale was beyond anything humanity had ever calculated. She stared at the growing blip on the map, approaching Earth from deep space with terrifying speed. Director Davis's voice crackled over the comms. "Dr. Morgan, this is no longer theoretical." His tone had shifted from cautious to grave. "We've got a situation here. The object's trajectory is direct. It's coming right for us." Ellen's heart raced as she swiftly scanned the incoming data, pulling up every model and calculation. She could think of none of them made sense. Nothing explained the object's movement. It wasn't just breaking the rules of physics. It was rewriting them in real time. Minutes later, every screen in the observatory flickered as a new signal shot through the system. A signal encoded with patterns Ellen had never seen before. It wasn't just the same as the first signal. It was stronger, more intense. It was no longer a simple distress call. It was a demand. The message it broadcasted now was short, urgent, and clear. "We are here." Suddenly, the entire world knew that humanity's response had triggered something far bigger than anyone could have imagined. Ellen watched in awe as the ship appeared in the sky. It wasn't like anything that had been theorized. No metallic behemoth or sleek futuristic design, but something far more alien. It had an organic shape that seemed to pulse with life, almost like the ship itself was breathing. Its surface shimmered with an otherworldly glow, reflecting the light of the sun in ways that no material on Earth could. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, a ship built from the stars themselves. The size of the ship was hard to comprehend. It dwarfed anything humanity had ever built or even dreamed of. As it slowly came to rest in orbit, the world watched in awe and fear. Ellen's hand hovered above the console as she waited for the first contact. What would the aliens look like? What would they say? Would they communicate in a way they could understand? A tense silence followed, broken only by the low hum of the ship's presence in orbit. The world's governments were already scrambling, military leaders meeting behind closed doors, strategizing how to respond to this unprecedented arrival. Despite the fear, there was no panic. The sheer magnitude of what was happening left everyone speechless, in a strange kind of awe, as if they were witnessing something sacred. As the minutes passed, the atmosphere around Earth's governments began to shift. Diplomacy was no longer an option. People were beginning to understand. This was not an invitation to conversation. This was an event of cosmic proportions, a declaration, a challenge. Finally, the moment came. The ship pulsed once, and from its depths, a low hum resonated through the atmosphere, a sound not of Earth, but of the stars themselves. It wasn't a noise. It was a voice, a presence that filled the void and echoed in their minds. The message was not in any language humans could recognize, yet it carried an unmistakable meaning. You answered. Now we will see if you are worthy. Humanity had taken a leap into the unknown. And now, standing on the brink of something much larger than itself, there was no turning back. The first chapter of an unimaginable encounter had begun, and Ellen Morgan couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. The days that followed were a blur of uncertainty and tension. The alien ship, now fully stationed in Earth's orbit, cast its long shadow over the world. It did not move, did not interact, but its presence was suffocating. Governments around the globe were on high alert, every military asset mobilized, and every communication line open in preparation for what could be an invasion or some other unimaginable event. But what concerned them most was the silence, the unbroken quiet from the alien ship. No demands, no messages, just an ever-present hum that seemed to echo through the atmosphere. Ellen and her team were called to the United Nations Assembly the next day, where representatives from every nation had gathered. Ellen stood at the front, facing a sea of concerned faces. She had already made her case to Director Davis and the higher-ups. The aliens were not here to conquer or destroy, not in the traditional sense, but convincing the rest of the world would be another matter entirely. Director Davis addressed the assembly, his voice tense with authority. This ship, which appears to be of an entirely unknown design, has not made any overtures of aggression. It's silent, but it's not idle. We can only assume that they're waiting for something. Dr. Morgan has hypothesized that their message is not meant for humanity, but their arrival suggests otherwise. Ellen glanced at the large projection screen behind them, showing the ship's eerie silhouette against the Earth's curve. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once, but there was a growing sense of dread that no one could shake. Humanity had made a mistake. They had responded, and now they would have to face whatever consequences followed. Suddenly, the air in the room seemed to crackle. The hum from the alien ship, once barely perceptible, became a wave of energy surging through the building. The screens flickered. Everyone's eyes were drawn to the central display as a series of rapid symbols appeared, flashing in front of them. The lights flickered. The alien ship was sending a message. Ellen's heart pounded as she watched. She had spent days analyzing their previous signal and had deciphered some of its structure. But this was different. This wasn't a pattern. It was more like a burst of raw energy, an assault on their minds, scrambling their understanding of reality. Then it stopped. The room fell silent, the tension so thick it was almost tangible. And then, as if responding to their collective anticipation, the air in the chamber hummed once again. The holographic image of the alien ship flickered, and a voice, low, rumbling, and ancient, filled the room, but it was not spoken aloud. Instead, it was heard in every person's mind, resonating within them like a shared thought. We are the voids. You are not ready. The voice echoed, reverberating in their consciousness, and the words seemed to carry a weight far greater than any mere message. Ellen felt it like a cold hand on her chest. The message wasn't just a warning. It was a judgment. The voids, who were they? What did they mean by, "You are not ready"? Ellen's mind raced as she tried to process what she had just heard, but before she could formulate any thoughts, the air in the room grew still once more. The message was over. There was only the soft hum of the ship and the oppressive silence that followed. Director Davis, his face pale, turned to her. "Dr. Morgan," he began, his voice shaky. "What does this mean? What are the voids? What do they want?" Ellen swallowed hard, her mind reeling. The voids, she realized, were not just any alien species. They were ancient, perhaps older than the universe itself. And this wasn't an invitation to join their ranks. This was a test, a trial. They had come not to help humanity, but to see if humanity was even worthy of surviving. The answer she had been dreading was now clear. The voids didn't care if humanity lived or died. They were simply the judges, watching from afar to see if humanity could prove itself worthy of continuing to exist in a universe far older and more complex than they could possibly imagine. Ellen looked at the faces around her, the fear, the uncertainty, and realized the terrifying truth. The challenge wasn't just surviving the alien ship or the threat it represented. The real challenge would be surviving the judgment of the voids. The universe was not a kind place, and humanity had just been thrown into a cosmic arena far beyond anything they had ever prepared for. "We have to prove ourselves," Ellen said quietly, her voice shaking, but resolute. "And I believe we can." The days after the void's message were filled with a disorienting mix of fear and hope. The world's governments were paralyzed by the enormity of the situation, caught between wanting to resist and a growing realization that resistance was futile. The voids had made it clear. They were not here to negotiate, not here to offer friendship. They were here as judges, observing and evaluating. Humanity had responded to their signal, and now they would see if Earth was worthy of continuing to exist. In the weeks that followed, Earth's most brilliant minds were called into action, each working furiously to prepare for what was coming. Ellen was put in charge of a small, top-secret team made up of scientists, engineers, military strategists, and diplomats. Their mission was to figure out how to work with the voids, to find some way to prove humanity's worth. But this wasn't going to be easy. The voids had left Earth with a cryptic message: "You are not ready." It wasn't a promise of a second chance, nor was it an offer of assistance. It was an ultimatum. They would give humanity the opportunity to demonstrate its value, but only if Earth could prove it was more than just a fleeting, fragile species. As Ellen met with her team in a secure underground facility, the weight of the task ahead seemed to hang in the air, suffocating. Her eyes scanned the room. Military generals, diplomats, engineers, and physicists, all staring at her, waiting for answers that she didn't have. The voids had made no effort to explain themselves, and every attempt to communicate had been met with silence. "We need to understand them," Ellen said, her voice sharp, trying to instill some sense of urgency in the room. "We don't have the luxury of time. If we don't act quickly, humanity will be wiped out before we even understand what we're up against." The room was silent for a long time, each person lost in their own thoughts. Finally, one of the military strategists spoke up. "The voids are ancient, older than anything we can comprehend. They're not here for our resources or to conquer us. They don't even care about our technology. This is about survival. But how do we show them we're worth saving?" Ellen stared at the map of the world projected on the wall, her mind racing through the possibilities. The voids had superior technology, a presence in space that defied all known laws of physics. They were beyond anything humanity could challenge with force alone. But there had to be another way. There had to be something that humanity had, something that the voids couldn't predict or control. "We need to show them that we're more than just survivors," Ellen said, her voice now steady with conviction. "We need to show them that humanity is capable of something they can't understand, that we're unpredictable, that we can adapt, innovate, and think beyond the rules they set." One of the engineers, a quiet woman named Dr. Sarah Hale, raised her hand. "But how do we do that? We don't even know what they want. All we've seen are their judgments, their tests. They're watching us like some kind of experiment. What if we fail?" "We won't fail," Ellen said firmly. We can't afford to. The voids don't understand humanity's spirit. They don't understand our capacity for creativity, for thinking outside the box. We have something they can't calculate: our adaptability, our willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. The room grew quiet as the weight of Ellen's words sank in. She could see the flicker of hope in their eyes, the belief that, despite all odds, they might be able to rise to the challenge. But they needed more than hope. They needed a plan. We need to engage with them, Ellen continued. We need to take the first step, show them that we won't just sit back and wait for them to pass judgment. We'll meet them halfway. We'll build a bridge. The military strategist nodded slowly. You mean work with them? Try to learn from them? Yes, Ellen replied. But we also need to show them that we have something to offer. Humanity isn't just a species to be judged and discarded. We can bring something to the table, if we figure out what that is. The group nodded in agreement, a renewed sense of purpose settling over the room. The task ahead was monumental, but there was no other choice. Humanity's fate hung in the balance, and the only way forward was to work with the voids, to prove that they weren't just another species to be discarded. They had to show the voids that they had value, that humanity was worthy of the universe's respect. And as Ellen stood before her team, a strange sense of determination washed over her. Humanity had always faced the impossible, and time again, they had found a way. This time would be no different. The days stretched into weeks, and humanity's collective nerves were frayed. As Ellen and her team worked tirelessly, the pressure mounted. They knew that their next move would define the fate of the planet. The voids, silent and unmoving, waited from their towering ship, observing. It was as if the galaxy itself had held its breath, waiting to see if humanity would rise to the challenge or be swallowed whole by the judgment of the voids. Ellen knew that diplomacy was no longer an option. The voids weren't here for negotiations. They were here to test humanity's resolve, to see if they could meet the cosmic standard that the voids had set. And now it was up to Ellen and her team to craft a response that would prove humanity's worth. One evening, after a long day of brainstorming, Ellen stood before a digital map of the world. The solution had to be bold, something the voids hadn't seen before. Something unexpected. A plan was beginning to take shape, but it was risky. She turned to Dr. Sarah Hale, the engineer who had been working alongside her on deciphering the technology they'd received from the voids. Do you think we can do it? Ellen asked quietly, her eyes locked on Sarah's. Can we break through their defenses with our combined technology? Sarah hesitated, her fingers twitching as she adjusted the holographic display. It's possible. The void technology is beyond anything we've ever seen. But if we combine their advances with our own ingenuity, our unpredictability, there's a chance. The rest of the team gathered around the table, eyes weary but focused. They had spent countless hours poring over alien schematics, trying to understand the technology the voids had sent. It was far beyond anything humanity had ever built. It bent the laws of physics, seemed to warp time and space itself. But there was one thing they could use to their advantage: humanity's ability to adapt. We don't have time to fully understand it, Ellen said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. We have to act now. We'll use the technology to create a weapon, one that could disrupt their core systems. We won't destroy them, but we'll give them a reason to reconsider their judgment. Show them that humanity's willingness to fight and innovate is a force to be reckoned with. The room grew quiet as the team processed Ellen's words. It was an audacious plan, and its success was far from guaranteed. But there was no other choice. If they failed, humanity's fate would be sealed. Hours later, the team was ready. They had constructed the weapon, a small but powerful device that would use a combination of void technology and human ingenuity to emit a concentrated energy pulse strong enough to interfere with the void systems without causing permanent harm. It was a gamble, but one that had to be played. Ellen stood in front of the control panel, her heart pounding. The device was loaded into a sleek shuttle, ready for launch. Outside, the massive silhouette of the void ship loomed overhead, its dark shape a constant reminder of the threat that hung over them all. The world's eyes were on them, watching and waiting. "Launch in T-5 minutes," a technician's voice came through the intercom. Ellen nodded, her breath steady as she looked around at her team. "This is it," she said softly. "Let's show them what we're made of." The shuttle was launched with precision, the sleek craft cutting through the atmosphere with a sense of purpose. As it reached the boundary of space, the device began to hum, drawing on the void technology. Ellen watched the monitors intently, her fingers hovering over the control systems. She couldn't afford to make a mistake now. The moment of truth arrived when the shuttle reached a safe distance from the void ship. Ellen activated the device, sending the energy pulse toward the colossal vessel. The world seemed to hold its breath as the pulse shot through the blackness of space, a bright arc of energy streaking toward the alien ship. Then, everything changed. The void ship's systems flickered, a momentary loss of stability. For a split second, the imposing ship seemed to shift, its smooth, organic surface warping as if it was struggling to maintain its form. The entire world watched in stunned silence as the first sign of weakness appeared. The pulse hadn't destroyed the ship, but it had disrupted its core systems, proving that humanity was not so easily dismissed. As the energy dissipated, the hum of the ship returned, but now there was something different. The ship didn't remain silent, it responded. A crackling voice filled the comms, distorted but unmistakable. The voids had spoken. "Impressive. You have learned something." Ellen exhaled slowly, her heart still racing. She had expected resistance, but this was something else. The voids were acknowledging them. It wasn't victory, not yet, but humanity had just taken the first step in a larger, more dangerous game, and the world would never be the same again. The world had changed in the wake of the void's response. The pulse had worked, barely, but it had shaken the alien ship's core systems, if only for a moment. That fleeting sign of weakness had sent ripples through Earth's governments, military leaders, and the general public. It was the first real sign that humanity could stand against the voids, but it also raised the stakes higher than ever. The voids hadn't obliterated Earth in retaliation, as many had feared, but they hadn't exactly offered mercy either. Ellen sat in a war room now, her eyes tired but sharp, alongside the team who had helped execute their plan. The initial response from the voids had been unsettling. They hadn't attacked immediately, but neither had they shown any signs of appeasement. They had simply acknowledged humanity's actions with a cold, calculating message. "Impressive. You have learned something." The room was filled with tension. No one knew what learning something truly meant. Was it a test? A trap? Or was the void's acknowledgement a sign of something else? Perhaps a chance at real interaction, at real diplomacy. "We've made contact," Director Davis said, his voice steady but tinged with an edge of uncertainty. "But we still don't understand them fully. We only know what they've shown us. And right now, we're at the mercy of what they decide next." Ellen nodded. Her mind was racing. They had learned the hard way that the voids were beyond humanity's understanding. The question now was how to engage with them, how to make them see that humanity wasn't just a primitive species worth eliminating or ignoring, but one worth respecting, perhaps even fearing. "I think we've only scratched the surface," she said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "The voids have seen our potential, but I don't think they'll judge us by one attack. They're watching how we react, how we adapt. They want to see how far we're willing to go." One of the military strategists, General Harrow, crossed his arms. "We're playing a dangerous game, Dr. Morgan. They could wipe us out without a second thought. And if we push too far, we might not even see it coming. We need a better understanding of their technology, their motivations." Ellen didn't disagree. Every instinct told her that humanity was on the brink of something far greater than anything they had ever anticipated. But she also knew that playing it safe was no longer an option. If the Voids wanted humanity to prove its worth, then the next steps had to be bold. "We need to be unpredictable," she said, locking eyes with Davis. "They've seen our weapon. They've seen we're willing to fight, but they don't know our greatest strength yet, our ability to adapt and outthink any challenge." Davis studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "I agree. But this isn't a fight we can win with brute force. It's not a war we're fighting. It's a test, and if we fail, it could be the end of everything." Ellen exhaled, her mind whirling. There had to be another way to prove humanity's worth, something that wasn't based on violence, but on ingenuity and resolve. The Voids were watching closely. If they didn't show humanity's value soon, they could fall into the cosmic void themselves, erased as an experiment gone wrong. And then it hit her. The Voids had come to test humanity, not for its ability to fight, but for its ability to build, to create, and to innovate. They weren't judging humanity on its capacity for destruction. They were judging humanity on its capacity for progress. It wasn't about winning the battle. It was about showing them that humanity could shape its own future, forge alliances, and rise above the challenges they were given. "We don't need to outfight them," Ellen said, her voice growing more confident. "We need to outthink them. What we need to do next is show the Voids that we can be more than their test. We can be a force in the galaxy, one they can't control, but one they can't ignore either." The silence in the room was palpable. Everyone stared at her, as if waiting for her to explain further. Ellen leaned forward, her thoughts crystallizing into a plan. "We start with something simple," she continued, her eyes narrowing as she envisioned the strategy unfolding. "A message, not of war, but of cooperation. We'll show them that humanity isn't here to be conquered, but to stand alongside those who will challenge the future. We'll offer them something they've never seen before, an invitation to evolve together." The room stirred with quiet disbelief and dawning realization. The battle for survival had turned into something greater, and humanity's next step would define not only their place in the universe, but their future as a species. The Voids had come to test humanity. Now, humanity would respond by showing them that they were more than a footnote in the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with. The message was prepared, transmitted, and sent. Humanity had made its boldest move yet. The world held its breath as they waited for the Void's response to the invitation they had offered. An invitation not for surrender or submission, but for collaboration. They would show the Voids that humanity wasn't just a species trying to survive. They were trying to thrive, to evolve, to take their place in the greater galactic community. If the Voids would accept them, they could forge a partnership beyond anything Earth had ever known. The transmission was simple, and yet it carried an immense weight, a statement of intention, a clear offer to join forces, to learn, to share knowledge and technology. To learn from the Voids. "We offer cooperation," the message said. "Together, we can shape the future." As the days passed, the tension continued to grow. Humanity's fate now rested entirely in the hands of the Voids. The alien ship still loomed above Earth, casting its unyielding shadow, but for the first time since the arrival of the ship, there was a glimmer of hope. The fear had not disappeared, but it had been replaced by a fragile sense of possibility. Ellen paced in the command center, her fingers brushing the edge of the console as she waited for a reply. The room was filled with a steady hum of activity as engineers, scientists, and military personnel continued their preparations, still unsure whether humanity's message had been heard or if it had fallen on deaf ears. The Voids had always been elusive, offering no clear response after their initial judgment. Their message had been cryptic, their presence overwhelming. But humanity had risen, not with weapons, but with an offer to engage, to collaborate. Ellen clung to the belief that this was the way forward, that showing humility and intelligence, rather than aggression, would be their salvation. Then, the alert flashed on the screen. The hum in the room grew louder as a new transmission arrived, one that sent a shiver down Ellen's spine. The message from the Voids had arrived. For a moment, there was complete silence in the room. Ellen's eyes locked on the screen. She wasn't sure what she expected, but she knew it would change everything. The message was short, almost chilling in its brevity. Your offer is unexpected. We will test your resolve once more. The room went cold. The voids had acknowledged humanity's offer, but their response held a weight of its own. This was not acceptance, nor was it rejection. It was an ultimatum, one that would push humanity to its very limits. Ellen's heart raced. She could feel the air in the room tighten as every person waited for her to make sense of the situation. She could see the doubt in the eyes of her team, the military leaders who had never expected this kind of response. They had prepared for an attack, for destruction, but not for this. The voids had not decided to destroy Earth, but they hadn't chosen to embrace humanity either. They were offering one more test, one final judgment. How do we respond? General Harrow asked, his voice a mixture of fear and determination. Ellen took a deep breath. She understood now. The voids were not interested in cooperation for its own sake. They were testing humanity's true potential, seeing if Earth could offer something that no other species had. They weren't just judging their technological capabilities. They were judging humanity's capacity for unity, for strength in adversity, for overcoming the greatest challenges. We respond by showing them that we will never give up, Ellen said, her voice steady with newfound resolve. We will meet their test, no matter what it is, and we will do it together. We are not a species that can be broken. We are not a species that will fall in the face of impossible odds. There was a moment of stunned silence before the team broke into action. Ellen's words had galvanized them. The voids wanted a test. Humanity would give it to them, and they would face whatever challenge came their way, united in their purpose. And so, Earth prepared for the final trial. Humanity had answered the call, offered peace, and now, they would face the unknown. The void's judgment was not over, but humanity was no longer cowering in fear. They had learned from their past. They had adapted, and they were ready. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, but for the first time since the arrival of the voids, Ellen knew one thing for certain. Humanity was no longer just waiting to survive. They were ready to thrive. They were ready for whatever came next.